Hello and welcome to All About Cars, and today we're going to talk about the Magnite because we've driven the car, we've driven the turbo version with both the CVT and the manual, but that's later in the video. Right now, let's dive straight into questions. Let's start with Instagram, and we've got Surya who's asking us, are there any heating issues with the Seltos DCT? Now we've heard about that and we've seen some messages come up, but it's not a very regular phenomena. It is, so he's asking, is it a problem if he commutes daily and he's looking at 2,000 kilometer running in a month? So it's not really a problem. You might get these messages depending on what the usage is. We haven't seen these messages come up regularly. In the time that we've used the Seltos, we've not, we've never seen that message come up, and we've driven the car in various conditions, various weathers. So, but it has happened, we've seen it. We've seen some pictures also on various social posts, but I don't think it's something to worry about. We asked Kia about it, and they very clearly said that it's not an issue, it's just an error message, it's a warning message, it's not a failure message, so there's nothing to worry about there. Rajiv has asked us, what is the best car to drive under 15 lakhs? He says, give him an option for an SUV, a sedan and a hatchback. So we'll just take you back to the best drivers car that we did. So if you're looking for a sedan under 15 lakhs, the new Honda City is a great option, petrol manual. If you're looking for a hatchback, then the Polo manual 1 liter TSI is a good option. And if you're looking for an SUV, then I think either the Venue or the Sonet both work. They have, again, they've got turbocharged engines, and both of them are pretty close when it comes to handling. So these would be the three options that we'd recommend. Zishan has asked us, should one consider the NCAP ratings while buying a car? And by NCAP, I'm guessing he means global NCAP, because that's the only one that uses cars with Indian spec. So there is no reason that you should not consider NCAP ratings or G-NCAP ratings while buying a car. Should it be your be-all and end-all? Well, that completely depends on individuals. It would probably not be for me, but it depends on, from one buyer to the other. The main reason for that is probably when I buy a car, I would probably buy a higher spec version. Maybe I'd probably buy a car with 6 airbags instead of 2. So that's the sort of thing. So the G-NCAP ratings don't reflect that. So I wouldn't base my buying decision completely on G-NCAP, especially if I'm not buying the base version of a car. Now let's take some questions off Facebook. And we've got Saurabh who says, is there any returnability issues in cars like the Tigor and the i10 Nios? Returnability, as he's explained, is that after turning, the steering does not return back to its original position and you have to pull it back. Now, for the longest time, I think Marutis and Hyundais had a slow returnability, but returnability is again a function of speed. So if you drive the car really slowly and turn, the steering isn't going to come back to its original position. But if you take a corner really fast, then the steering does come back. Of course, there is some amount of engineering that goes into putting that into place, and for the i10 Nios and the Tigor, it is not a problem. It does return. It won't return back to its original position. It would, it's again a reflection of speed, right? If you end up sliding the car, then it won't just stay there. It would go all the way to the opposite side of the lock. So, which you would have seen that people don't really turn it so much. They just, once the car starts to slide, they just pull it and it automatically goes to that. So, both these cars, you have returnability in the steering. So no, there's, you don't have to completely dial it back like you would in a, I don't know, like a gaming console, for instance. Rahul has asked us, which of the two should he go for, the Ertiga or the XL6? The Ertiga is of course available in the Arena showroom, so wider network. The XL6 is available off Nexon. Now the difference between the two cars essentially is that the XL6, as the name suggests, seats 6 and the Ertiga can seat 7. Now between the two, if you like the way the XL6 looks, then that's a reason to go for the XL6, and if you want a little more equipment. But between the two, I'd say the Ertiga makes more sense because the bench seat allows you to do a lot more, not just seat an extra person. So that's the option that I would say, that the Ertiga makes more sense than the XL6. Ankit has asked us, Nexon ya Sonet, which is best? So we'd say that as product, for considering just 4 people in a family, the Sonet is a better option. If you are looking for a car with better road presence, better ride, a more comfortable seating overall, and seating for 5, then the Nexon makes more sense. But like I said, these are the two ways to look at it, to pick one. Now let's take some questions of Twitter. We've got Ruban, who wants to know which is better, the Tiago or the Maruti Suzuki Swift. The Swift in our book is a much better car than the Tiago in terms of driving, in terms of engines, efficiency, overall experience of ownership. The Swift is definitely a better car. Bhupinder wants to know, when would Tata launch the new Safari? We don't know when they're going to launch the new Safari. I think right now their focus is on the Harrier and the Gravitas, and probably the Hexa may make a comeback, we don't know. But Safari would probably make a comeback in the future, but right now I don't think that's on the cards. And now let's take some questions from our YouTube video we did last week. And we'll start with Utsav. Utsav wants to know, could you tell us about the new generation Ford EcoSport? When is it coming? We don't know. I don't think it is going to be launched anytime soon, even in the next year. What you are going to see is the EcoSport getting a new petrol engine, the one that it's going to borrow from Mahindra. It might come with some changes on the inside, maybe a few changes on the outside, but a new generation Ford EcoSport is not on the cards at the moment. Santosh says that he drives 1,000 kilometers a month in the city and makes some occasional long trips. It doesn't matter to him whether it's an AMT or a manual. All he wants is that the car should have good ride, it should be comfortable, and he's looking for a top spec version. And his budget is about 12 lakh rupees. So we'd say the Honda Jazz is a good option here. You've got a car that's practical, that's spacious. If you like driving yourself, the Petrol Jazz is an easy, nice car to drive, good visibility, easy controls, and that engine has good low and mid, so you can use it in the city without having to bother or to make quick a lot of gear changes. The clutch is light, so the Jazz, and it's efficient. So the Jazz is what we'd recommend for you. Praveen has asked us whether it makes sense to go for a 2017 Tata Tiago 1.2 Revitron XZ. It's done about 40,000 kilometers, and the car and the asking price for the car is 3.3 lakhs. So we'd say it is a good deal. The car does lose some amount of money, and when you look at the pricing now, I think it fits. Tiago as a car also in the Revitron with the 1.2 Revitron XZ trim is a fairly good car to go for. So if the condition is good, it is a good deal, 3.3. We got a question from Adish. It's a long question. I will try and read it. With the SUV-nization of VW, it's a term that VW used. Adish wants to know, when can they expect the new generation Polo? Will it be based on the MQB A0 Ion platform, the new platform that will spawn the 2 SUVs from VW, one from VW and one from Skoda? He says, in our opinion, will the next gen Polo be the 6th gen or directly the 7th gen, considering it's likely that VW will launch another version of it or another generation of it. He's asked when the Tiguan comes, the Taigun comes, which is based on the new MQB A0 Ion platform. Will it sit under the T-Roc? And And could that mean that a sub 4 meter SUV, which will be priced lower than the Taigun, could also be on cards? All right, so the Polo that will come to India, and it will, a new generation Polo, yes, it will be based on the MQB A0 Iron platform. It will not be the car that is sold in Europe. It will not be that platform in that sense, in purity. But the new generation Polo, or the Polo based on the MQB A0 Iron platform, will take some time. We'll first have these SUVs, we'll have the Taigun from VW, and then we'll have the new Vento based on this platform, and then possibly we'll see the Polo. Is there going to be an SUV that will come under the Taigun? Yes, there will be. I think VW is working towards that. As far as the Taigun and the T-Roc, the Taigun will sit under the T-Roc, so it is a smaller car, but I think the pricing will be closer to the likes of the Creta and not like the Brezzas or the Sonnets, the Venus. So clearly that is also a segment that VW would want to look at, and so there will be a car smaller than the Taigun or lesser priced than the Taigun in the future. Near, midterm, we're not sure, but yeah. So I hope that answers all the questions that you listed. Next, we've got Gautam. He says he is 153 centimeters in height. Can he drive the Tata Harrier? Now, honestly, it's very difficult to tell because we've not seen that. I mean, we've not really experienced it within the team either, but I don't think it should be a problem. The Harrier, the seat drops down, and if you and so you should be able to reach the pedals and the steering. Now the question is that all that one needs to look at? No, you need to look at visibility as well, whether you're able to see properly at the front. Are you able to see out of the windows to see the traffic around you? So if that's a stretch, then maybe you need to avoid the Harrier, but go test drive it first, and that will give you a clear perspective. But do remember that visibility is as important as you being able to reach the controls, so don't compromise on that. Next up, Sachi has written to us and said that the ADAS features, that's advanced driving assistance systems, seem to be something we can expect in a few upcoming cars like the Citroen C5 and the XUV 500, but are these features like auto braking and adaptive cruise control really useful in Indian city conditions? So city conditions, auto braking, yes. I think it's a helpful feature, especially if you're driving slowly in stop and go traffic and you get distracted by whatever, either there's a message on the phone or somebody just crossed you and the car's moving ahead just stops. This car will automatically stop, so you won't get into a pile-up in that sense. So auto braking is a great feature. It might have issues like if you're driving at, let's say, 20 kilometers per hour and somebody decides to just cut across, maybe the car will just brake, I don't know, and maybe the guy behind you might come into you, but I don't know. I mean, it's something that we'll have to see, but I think it's a feature, it's a good feature to have, and it should work in the city. As for adaptive cruise control, it's not a feature that you'd want to use in the city, but yes, on the highway, you can set the speed limit based on, you know, let's say if you're on an expressway, you can do that. And then the car will automatically slow down. You can set the distance, what's the sort of distance you want between, you know, the car in front. And it will, of course, slow down to the speed limit that the car is there in front. And when the car moves away, it will go back to its same speed. And I think adaptive cruise control, a lot of systems now bring the cars to a dead stop if the car stops in front. So it's a good feature to have again, but I don't think it's a feature that you'd use in the city. Manoj has asked us what is our opinion when it comes to safety for the EcoSport. EcoSport, if you buy the top spec, you get 6 airbags, you've got, I think you've got ESP, you've got EBD, you've got tire pressure monitoring system, so lots of safety features in place. So I think, yeah, we think pretty highly of the EcoSport when it comes to safety, especially the top spec versions. Sundar Krishnan has written to us and asked us, he wants to buy a petrol SUV under 15 lakh. What should he go for? He can wait till the first half of 2021. So we'd say go for the Hyundai Creta. It's a good car, spacious car, comfortable car, reliable car, and you've got a fair amount of features, you've got good resale, and you've got a wide service network. Jay Mehta has asked us which is the best 6/7 seater car available in the market currently. He's got a budget up to 23 lakhs, and are there any new launches expected in this class in the future, say up till March? So Jay, I think right now if you were to buy a car, we'd say the Innova is the one to go for. It was always designed to be a people's carrier, 3-row seating, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-seater, 8-seater options, I guess. So it's definitely the car to buy if you're looking at a 6-7-seater option. Among new launches, you will have the Gravitas, which is the Harrier with a slightly longer length and another row of seating. But even then, we feel that as a car, as a people's carrier, Innova is still the best option to go for. Next question is from Mangesh. Mangesh has written, Sir, i20 Asta Zero 1.2 खरीदें या Sonet HTX IMT, बजट 11 लाख. तो मंगेश, अगर आपको SUV चाहिए तो नेचुरली आप सोनेट खरीदेंगे, बट अगर सिर्फ प्रोडक्ट के हिसाब से देखें तो i20 मुझे लगता है ज़्यादा सेंस बनता है i20 ख़रीदने में, क्योंकि आपको ज़्यादा जगह मिलती है और आपके पास मैनुअल का ऑप्शन है, और आप एस्टा ओ ख़रीद रहे हैं तो आपको ज़्यादा फीचर्स भी मिलते हैं. तो अगर आपको SUV चाहिए तो सॉलिड है, आप सोनेट ही लेंगे. लेकिन अगर उस तरफ आप हैचबैक से भी खुश हैं और SUV से भी खुश हैं तो मैं कहूँगा कि आप नई i20 लें, एस्टा ओ. The next question is from Rahul, and he wants to know whether he should go for the turbo petrol or the diesel in the Seltos. He says the monthly running is 2,500 kilometers and 2,000 of those are on highway. And he also wants to know whether the Seltos will be able to make it to Leh, Spiti or Sikkim compared to the Harrier. So yes, it will be able to make it as much as the Harrier can, because they're both front-wheel drive monocoque SUVs. As for choosing turbo petrol and diesel, if they're similarly priced, then diesel makes more sense, because you're going to spend less money at the pump every time you fill up, and of course you will have to go to the pump lesser number of times. But if there's a price differential, 40,000-50,000, then I think the petrol makes sense, because your running still isn't as much, but that's something that you need to decide. Akhil says, please comment on the Hyundai i20 Sports IVT variant in terms of mileage and also whether the IVT gearbox is reliable. So IVT is essentially CVT, and CVT is one of the more reliable gearboxes you can have. They're less stressed compared to the other ones, so they're more seamless to drive. It's a great option if you're going to be using it in the city. Mileage with the IVT is a tricky thing, because you really need to know how to use the throttle pedal properly. If you are aggressive with it, then the fuel efficiency can drop dramatically. But if you plan ahead and if you're gentle with it, and then you continue to get a high turn of speed, but you don't lose out on mileage. So you have to be very mindful when you're driving a CVT, but once you get a hang of it, it is one of the better gearboxes to have. Suraj has asked us that he's looking for a sub 4 meter petrol car with an automatic transmission, and he's looking for good features. He's not looking at enthusiastic driving. So he wants to know in terms of hatchback and SUVs, what are the options to go for. So in the hatchback, the Jazz CVT makes a lot of sense. For under 10 lakhs or about 10 lakhs, you can get a well-equipped car. And of course, Jazz has its own plus points like space and practicality and easy ingress, egress and ease of driving. When it comes to SUVs, maybe the Sonet might be a good option to look at. It's one of the newer sub 4 meter SUVs in the market, and we've spent a lot of time with the car and we've not really found anything to complain about. Nihal has asked us what sort of star rating, crash star rating can we expect for the Creta 2020, the new one. So I'd say it'll be similar to the Seltos. It's essentially the same car, different top hat, but in terms of design, the monocoque design, etc., and the crumple zones and all of that, it would be similar. So should be similar to the Seltos. Ajay has asked us if the Glanza hybrid is a value for money offering, and it costs about 9.3 lakhs, he says, in Bangalore. and is there any other vehicle that's more efficient? So we'd say for 9.3 lakhs, the Glanza is a good option. It is value for money. You get lots of space, you get a decently big boot, it's a nice car to drive, it's light, and if you want more fuel efficiency compared to the Glanza, then you'd probably have to go lower down in the segments, because the Glanza is already a very light car and it's got a reasonably efficient 1.2 litre petrol engine. So I think Glanza would be a good option to go for. Vijay has written to us and he's asked us which car should one choose if it is based purely on engine, the Tata Nexon petrol or the Hyundai Kia Turbo, Hyundai/Kia Turbo engines, the 1 litre petrol engines. And if he were to choose the Nexon, should he go for the petrol or the diesel? So I would say both petrol and diesel engines on the Nexon are good. They're turbocharged engines, so you can go with either or, I mean, depending on what you like, depending on what your running is. Now, between the Nexon 1.2 turbo and the Hyundai/Kia 1 litre turbo, we'd probably go with the Hyundai/Kia engine. It's completely down to the refinement levels, it's completely down to the overall NVH and the way the power is delivered, that we'd pick the 1 litre turbo over the 1.2 of the Nexon. Abdul has asked us whether he should go for the Endeavour or the Fortuner, and if the Endeavour's 2 litre current single turbo engine is good enough, spirited enough, or should he wait for the bi-turbo 2 litre. So between the Endeavour and the Fortuner, the Endeavour hands down, no two ways about it. It's a car that works better on road, it's a car that feels richer, and in terms of overall driving experience, it's a better car. The Fortuner certainly works better off-road, but for everything else, I think the Endeavour is a better car or a better SUV. Now, the 2 litre engine that it currently comes with, yes, it's not very high on power or torque, but we've driven that car extensively, and there are no real issues there. I mean, it manages its weight quite well. It doesn't feel tremendously fast or torquey, but it's definitely par for the course. But if you want more torque, if you want more power, then of course you can wait for a bi-turbo or a newer engine, but we have no clue when that's coming. So, Vigneshwar has asked us about alternatives to the Baleno CVT. Now, the Baleno CVT is by far the best spec for the price, and if I were to look at similar pricing, you can look at the Jazz CVT, you can look at the i20 CVT or IVT option, but the i20 is not as well spec'd. The Jazz is somewhere in between. The Jazz is a more practical car. So yeah, I mean, these are your 3 options really, 2 options and the Baleno, so you can make a choice. Abhijit has asked us whether he should go for the Nios i10 top spec version, or are there any alternatives. So I'd say if you like the i10 Nios, then that's the one you should go for. Top spec means that you've got a fair amount of features, and as a car, it's a comfortable car, it's an easy to drive car, it's an efficient car, it's a well-made car. So yeah, the i10 Nios in the top spec version certainly works. And that's a wrap on the questions, and now we'll tell you how the Nissan Magnite is to drive, how it is as a product. And let's start with the engine. Now, it comes with 2 versions or 2 engine options. There's the 1 litre naturally aspirated petrol, and there's a turbo 1 litre. We've only driven the turbo, we've driven the CVT and the manual, and between these two, for city purposes, the CVT is absolutely brilliant. It's seamless, it's quiet, and there is that effect that you get, like what we like to call the rubber band effect or the stretchy effect, but it's not as pronounced. And if you work the throttle well, you would probably never feel that on that car. So a CVT is a great option. The manual is, the shift quality requires a little bit of effort. It's short throw, but it requires a little bit of effort. The clutch is also slightly heavy. I think it could have been lighter. It's not really heavy, but it could have been lighter. And the manual also works well with the turbo engine. And if you like driving, maybe that's the one you should go for. The car As far the engine goes, I think there is a hint of turbo lag, but once you're past 1800, you can see the engine come on song, and it's the low and the mid is very, very strong on that engine. It revs to about 6,500 RPM. Till 3,000 RPM, it's quiet. You can barely hear anything in the car. Then of course you can start hearing the engine, and once you rev the engine past 5,000, then you can tell it's like a small angry thing that's just screaming away, so you don't want to do that. But the thing is, for all practical purposes, up to 3,000 you can make all your upshifts at 3,000. It keeps you in that accessible power band and makes it a really nice car to drive and be with. So that's where the drivetrain is. In terms of other positive points would be the styling. I think it looks great. It looks a little smaller than you think in the pictures, but it's still a good looking car. It has good road presence, and when you step inside, the space is especially the knee room and headroom is excellent. When you look at it from the outside, you might think that it's short on space, but it's not. And the seating itself is slightly high at the front and at the back, and so you get okay thigh support. I wouldn't say it's great, but it's not bad. But it's a comfortable car to be in. The backrest also, the angle lets you stay comfortable, and there is enough visibility through the windows, so it doesn't feel hemmed in. So space-wise, for 4 people, I think they've got that right. And even the design inside is good. Of course, it's not, it doesn't have the same quality feel, look and feel as, let's say, the Sonet. And in some places, the plastic can look a little cheap. But in terms of functionality, in terms of the way it's designed, the way it looks, I think it looks young and sporty. Of course, you can tell that it's not built or it's not made to be a very, very expensive car. And it won't be. We'll get to the price in a bit. In terms of features, for the top spec version that we drove, you've got almost everything barring a sunroof. Everything else is there, wireless charging. You've got a nice Japanese sort of feeling instrument cluster. I really like it. A lot of people might find this childish or kiddish, but I personally really like it. It just makes it seem all alive. So that's there. What else? You've got enough, pockets to put your stuff, cup holders, bottle holders, etc. All of that is there. Now, when it comes to driving, I think the ride quality is well judged. At slower speeds, it rides well. It doesn't have any of that low speed bobbing that you get when you've got stiffer cars, so it rides pretty flat in that sense. Even the small undulations, it handles really well. It doesn't go into a complete rock and roll mode if you go over bad roads, so it remains comfortable in that sense. The only thing that happens is if it catches like a really deep pothole, so then it tends to crash into that, but that's not going to be very, very often, especially in the city. Maybe on the highway, if you catch a bad pothole, then it's possible. But overall, I think the ride on the car is pretty good. What we would have liked better though is the steering. Now, the steering is way off center. It's also lots of turns lock to lock, which means it's a slow steering. So there's a lot more steering input you need to put for it to respond. And the steering itself is not very light compared to competition, so there's some amount of effort there. So that could have been lighter. The steering feel, not feel so much, but the steering response could have been a little better. Steering feel is not something that we get in any of the cars in this class, so we're not really, that's nothing. So overall, I would say it's a job well done for Nissan. It's a car that they had to get right for them to make a comeback into the Indian market. I think they've done that. And the pricing, the expected pricing is for this top spec is 9.55 or thereabouts, which makes it almost 2 lakhs cheaper than the newer SUVs like the Sonet. And this is still it sits on the same wheelbase or similar wheelbase as the Sonet in the Venue. So it's essentially a similar sized car, but you're saving so much money there, and you get all the specs and features are there. You've also got a turbo engine. So it's a very well sorted thing. Now I think they just have to get the reach right, and Nissan says that they're going to open quite a few service outlets and showrooms with the launch of this car. So I think that reach is also not going to be a problem. So Should you buy the Magnite? Yes. There are no really big red flags there that would say that you should not buy it. For the price, I think it's great value if it comes at this price. If it's more expensive, then of course our opinion changes completely. But for this price, I think it's a car that you should certainly go for. Yeah. And that's a wrap on All About Cars. We'll see you next week.